as we mute ourselves, okay? Yes, I'm H.A. Penner from Akron, Pennsylvania. I'm the facilitator coordinator of 1040 for Peace. Welcome to this special February 2022 session. We meet monthly. 1040 for Peace exists to encourage folks to express their conscience regarding their citizenship and regarding how they pay their taxes, both what they pay and what they don't pay. Specifically, we as an organization encourage taxpayers to consider withholding $10.40 from their annual federal taxes, income taxes, the levy, and send that amount to a humanitarian organization, agency like Community Peacemaker Teams that we're going to hear about this evening. I'll just interject here that we have a very close relationship to Community Peacemaker Teams. As you might imagine, 1040 for Peace is not a 501c3 organization. We've never tried to get it because we don't think we could get it. But Community Peacemaker Teams has always been very supportive of us, and whenever we need a fiscal sponsor, they provide it. And so that's a wonderful thing that Community Peacemaker Teams does. We also encourage war tax redirectors to communicate their concerns to the government, and details on this can be picked up on more about 1040 for Peace can be picked up from our web page, and also we have a Facebook page, so you can check into those. We've had a couple of wonderful programs along the way, and tonight is just another one of those. We're fortunate to have Weldon, Nisly, and Lukasz, Firla of the Community Peacemaker Teams to share. Weldon has been has a long history with as a peacemaker. I could just go. I don't know where to start, Weldon, in terms of all the things that you've done in terms of pastoral ministry, including Mennonite Central Committee, and you were even a part of an Iowa Peace Network. Is that correct? Which is Iowa is his native state. He actually grew up there on a farm, and so after that he was involved with Witness for Peace, and then a pastor of the Cincinnati Mennonite Fellowship, and then pastor of the Seattle Mennonite Church up until 2013. Since then, I mean, all the things that he's done, but one of the things that he's been engaged in more recently has been this Iraqi Kurdistan team. He's affiliated with Community Peacemaker Teams for a number of years since his retirement, and so tell us about it, Weldon. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, H.A. I'm going to go on and share screen and see if we get this set up to slideshow.
While Weldon is doing that, I'll just say that if you have questions along the way, please put those questions in the chat, and we'll follow up with those after the session is over. Otherwise, keep your computer muted if you can, so that Weldon and Lukasz can talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lukasz and I are really grateful for this opportunity to be with you and to share about our CPT IK Iraqi Kurdistan team and partners. Lukasz is from the Czech Republic and lives in Colombia with his Colombian spouse in Bogota. He came to the Iraqi Kurdistan team on a delegation in 2009, and then was an intern in 2010 and joined the team in 2011. He's been with the team a long time, and he has, for a good many years now, has also been the program support coordinator for our team. So, Lukasz, I'm very grateful for your joining me on this one as well. Before we get to the CPT IK story, I begin on a personal war tax resistance note. On January 30, just recently, I began a Zoom sermon for a church in Iowa with this slide. The title of my sermon was Jesus, Truth, and Peace. And I begin with Jesus, Truth, and Peace, which is the heart of my own life and faith and has grounded and guided my pastoral peace ministry for almost half a century. Jesus, Truth, and Peace led us to begin war tax resistance in the early 1970s. So one very brief story. In 1990, when I was pastor at Cincinnati Mennonite Fellowship, IRS was trying to recover our war tax withholding from an earlier year, and our bank account was less than the amount they were trying to recover. So IRS levied the congregation to recover the funds they said we owed them. That motivated the congregation to do a pretty intense long-term study about war and war tax resistance and discern a response. And by consensus, the congregation declined to comply with the IRS levy. An interesting note in that was the IRS agent was very miffed, not only that the congregation refused to pay them, but also she was also miffed that they refused to fire me. She thought they didn't know that I was doing that and hoped they would fire me. IRS then eventually did garnish my wife's wages, but I calculated the cost for IRS to collect this money from us was greater than the amount they eventually collected. For a moment, ponder again these visual messages about the insane cost of war. You know them so well, I won't comment on them directly. Paying for war is a choice for death rather than for life. The God of Hebrew scriptures said through the Deuteronomist, I set before you life and death, therefore choose life so that you and all children and future generations may live. To choose life means refusing to choose death for others while not fearing death for ourselves. Choosing life is not so much for ourselves as it is for our children and grandchildren and for all the children and grandchildren and creation forever. The first casualty of war is truth. The rest are mostly civilian. Now, 90% of civilian, 90% of deaths in war are civilian. 80% of those are women, children, and elderly. Also, as I like to say, war is a lie. Our country leads the world in waging endless war rooted in the lie of war. The war on terror, by design and definition, is forever war. And as I want you to hear this, the way I've come to say it is war we can't win, can't lose, can't stay, can't leave. Warmongering is propelling us to the brink of World War III over Ukraine and closer than ever to nuclear annihilation, the end of the earth as we know. Excuse me. A world war cannot be won, but a warned world can become one. 20 years of endless war on Afghanistan and Iraq has cost us, the US, $8 trillion. But the actual cost of waging endless war for the US is $1 trillion a year. The real cost is the lives lost, displaced, traumatized, the destruction, the dysfunction, the corruption, and so on. The only winners of endless war are war profiteers who are making a killing on killing. Does anyone really believe that spending 8 trillion or $20 trillion for peace rather than war over the past 2 decades would not make the world a safer, more peaceful place. So with that introduction on war and war tax resistance, Lukasz and I invite you to come with us to Iraqi Kurdistan to meet people caught up in endless war, not of their making or choosing. Christian Peacemaker Teams was envisioned by Mennonites and founded by historic peace churches and peace groups in the mid-'80s. Some of you, I know John Stoner was involved in that. CPT has learned a lot over the past 35 years and grown a lot with our partners. And one learning led CPT to a new name. In January, Christian Peacemaker Teams became Community Peacemaker Team. The name reflects our international multi-faith spirituality without relinquishing our commitment to Jesus' nonviolent love and true peace. Another learning for CPT led to a new mission. CPT's original mission was getting in the way, as in getting in the way of war. From 2003 to 2006, CPT was in Baghdad, getting in the way of war, accompanying people targeted by war on terror, although Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. I like to say also that CPT, that getting in the way is also getting in the way of Jesus, as in getting in the way with Jesus, the way of Jesus in solidarity with people terrorized by war. CPT learned that getting in the way of war imposed white Christian ways on people who know better than we do what making peace in their life and land looks like. So listening to and learning from local people, CPT lived into a new mission. Building partnerships to transform violence and oppression by accompanying people targeted by war and political oppression, by advocating with them for their human rights and peace, and by amplifying their voices to the world. This is a recent CPT team. We come from various places. Our commitment is to have both Kurdish and foreign team members on the team. We have 4 to 6 members on the team. We're in a transition year where some new members will be joining us throughout this year. I will return for April, May, and most of June this spring. The Kurdistan region of Iraq. Now, this map first, this map here indicates, gives some context for the Kurdish region of the Middle East. Not everyone knows that super well. You see here the red border encircles a homeland for 40 to 50 million Kurds over a 4-nation region of Eastern Turkey, Western Iran, Northern Iraq, and Northern Syria. The Kurdistan region of Iraq, or the KRI, is a semi-autonomous region of Northern Iraq. It functions much like a state does in relation to the United States. In this map, it's identified by the green, gold, purple, brown areas across, that's Northern Iraq there, that's Kurdish region. The rest of Iraq is to the south of this. Syria is up on the northeast there, Turkey's to the north, and the east of it is Iran. The team is based in Suleimani, you see there in white in that region, but we travel all across this region to fulfill 3 priorities. First, with citizens targeted by Turkey and Iran's cross-border bombardment in the name of the war on terror, initiated and defined by the US. Second, with civil society activists and independent journalists whose lives are threatened by the Kurdish ruling regime. And third, leading nonviolence trainings for people committed to building peace and refusing to wage war. Lukasz and I are going to focus primarily on Turkey's cross-border bombardment and invasion and occupation of Iraqi Kurdistan and the consequences of war on the lives and livelihood of innocent people. Nala Valley is a farming valley between mountain ranges in north central Iraqi Kurdistan. After daytime meetings with CPT Nala Valley partners, the team was staying in our friend Yusuf's guest house in the village of Haliman at night, as we often do. It was a beautiful October evening with children playing outside and women baking bread and making dinner, men coming in from the field herding sheep and goats. Suddenly, the evening calm was shattered by Turkish warplanes screaming overhead and bombing the village of Hizanka, a couple of miles away. Turkey claims to target PKK Kurdish resistance force who are resisting Turkey's oppression. Turkey and the US and Canada are called PKK terrorists, thereby justifying cross-border bombardment and military invasion. As usual, civilians suffer most from the war. Hizanka farmer Kakadar was closest to the first bomb. Here he's pointing to his farm and telling CPT about the bomb landing nearby that evening. He was herding his cows into the barn when the first bomb exploded, first of 3 bombs in a short time there exploded. Terrified, he left the barn door open, ran down to the house, got his family in the car, and drove down the hill a bit to the nearby village. Bombing is traumatizing for Kakdadar's family and neighbors. Animals are also traumatized. His cows gave less milk, and some cows miscarried after these bombings. Kakdadar is farmed here. He's in the blue in the center there. And he's farmed here all his life and refuses to leave. I love this land in these mountains, he told us. This is all I've ever known. A few years ago, my wife died and I buried her body here on my farm. And then Kakadar choked up and tears trickled down his cheeks as we just stood there with him in silence for a while. It was a beautiful, peaceful, sunny day in the Nala Valley. But Kakadar knew all too well the terror of a peaceful day suddenly shattered by warplanes bombing his beloved Nala Valley. In October, the team traveled to Zahol, a town near the border with Turkey and Syria, to meet Hadi and Mustafa and Muhammad. A few weeks earlier, Turkey had bombed around the village of Harure. Lukasz will tell you more about that in a minute. It included their farm. Clouds from the bombing drifted down across their farm, leaving them choking and nauseous and vomiting with severe skin rashes. Terrified, the family fled from their home farm to the town of Zahol, where we met them a couple of weeks later. A grandmother, you can hardly see in the black with the white around her head there, is lying on that blue bed. She had been very healthy and active on the farm, but the bombing left her so ill and weak that she's unable to get out of bed. Barely able to speak as we stood there by her bed, she quietly asked us to pray for her and her family. Later that day, we met Kaktant, another Hurarian farmer who was injured by Turkey's bombing while picking walnuts from a tree on his farm. He fled to the regional city of Duhok and is recovering there when we met him. We are civilians. We should not be paying the cost of this fight, Kaktant told us. I can't work anymore, he lamented. I need more operations because my muscles are not working and there's still shrapnel in my arms and legs. One night, Turkish warplanes bombed around the mountain village of Zuka. In the morning, all 20 families fled down the mountain. They found temporary shelter in these tents by a river in a valley far below. Zuka schoolmaster, the headmaster, Awat, urged CPT to come to the displaced village and meet with them. So we did. Village matriarch, Per Aish, invited us into her tent with true Kurdish hospitality. As we sipped tea, she quietly told us about being bombed and forced to flee. She explained, we face an impossible choice, being bombed or being flooded. If we return to our village, we'll be bound, she said. But if we stay here, we'll be flooded by the fall rains, which are already beginning. Her Aish embodied Zuka's resilience and resolve to care for each other in this traumatizing time. The children of displaced Zuka village were going to school in a tent. They had 2 tents like this one on the rocky shore of the river. These 2 girls on the right shared a desk for their outdoor class by the river. And already when it was raining, they couldn't have school because the water would come up too high and would soon get worse. But the children of Zuka and their dedicated teachers refused to let war keep them from learning and getting an education. The violence of war, poverty, climate crisis, and oppression has forced 84 million people around the world to flee their homes. 40% are children. A major cause of forced migration is warring madness. God have mercy. For perspective, 84 million people is a quarter of the population of the United States, or the whole population of Turkey is 84 million. Only 17 out of 195 countries in the world have more than 84 million people. Hold that in your heart as Lukasz leads us further on the journey in Iraqi Kurdistan. Now let me stop sharing and yeah. Okay, Lukasz.
Yes. Thank you, Weldon. Thank you, everyone, for having us here tonight with you. So my name is Lukasz, and I have been with the Iraqi Kurdistan team since 2011. I will share my screen this time and continue sharing with you more about the war that Turkish forces are bringing to Iraqi Kurdistan. Let me just, I will switch to this. Okay, now the image that I would like to share with you is a map of places where Turkish military harmed and killed civilians. The area that you see is an area of about 250 to 300 miles across, and the Turkish bombings are happening all over the border, okay? And as far as like 100 to 150 miles south of the border as well. You might recognize this plane. Turkey, for most of the 30 years that they have been bombing Iraqi Kurdistan, have been doing so with the US-made warplanes, and recently the US stopped the sale of the F-35 fighter jets to Turkey. And actually, Turkey is kind of running into a problem because the F-16s and the F-4s that they have are expiring, and many of the parts are too old. So Turkey is trying to fix them, and trying to build their own warplane as well. I would like to share a bit more about the aspects of the war and of the impacts on civilians. Here you can see a family of Himdat Osman, who was a 23-year-old young man who just became a father of a baby boy. He was driving one time in his car next to his hometown that is called Barmiza, when a Turkish warplane bombed him and killed him in the car. His family became partners with our team, and began to share about his death. So then in the photo that you can see the more meeting from November 13, this just past year, where we as CPT came to visit the family and mourn over the grave of Himdat, their son. He was one of the many people that were killed by Turkish warplanes made in the USA. Because of the problems with the fighter jets, and they're getting too old, and also because the US did not want to share the armed drones with Turkey. And so for many years, the war was happening in this way, that US forces would provide intelligence to Turkey, and then Turkish warplanes came and started bombing people. But in the 2016-17, Turkey was able to create its own armed drone that we can see in this picture. It is called Bayraktar. It's made by an engineer who actually studied in the USA and then came back to Turkey and said, "I will build you an armed drone." So the Turkish president, current one, actually married his daughter with this engineer, put a lot of money into the company, and Turkey began to produce a very efficient armed drone. And then there are countries now around Europe that are buying this drone from Turkey because it's cheaper than the US drones. Turkey is willing to share it easily with other countries, and so there is one issue with that, is that Turkey until now is not able to produce all the parts of this drone. So some of the parts are coming from different nations, from different countries, and are, so Turkey is still dependent on the sale of weapons. So what you are doing, refusing to pay and taking action, one of the things is actually stopping US from selling parts to the drones or of the Turkey makes. The family of Peyman Talib were in a store. They had a grocery store in a small town that is outside of Süleymaniye city, where our team lives. They were just selling things for families that came on a picnic on the very hot day, because there is a river flowing through the town. As they were in the store, a car stopped in front of the store. One man came out to buy eggs and some other groceries, and at this moment, a Turkish drone bombed the car and the store. Later, the family found out that the people who came in the car were actually members of a guerrilla. So they were fighters who are fighting for the rights of Kurdish people, and they stopped in front. They were wearing civilian clothes, but it seemed that Turkey was following them with the drone and waited until the car stops in front of a grocery store with families with children who are playing in the water and trying to cool in this very hot day, and then bombed the car from this drone. So Peyman Talib lost one of her legs, and then she was badly hurt, badly burned and injured, and her children and her husband ended up with many pieces of shrapnel in their bodies. Peyman wanted to be a teacher, so she was actually she opened the store with her family to make money to be able to study to be a teacher eventually. Now she stays at home. She needs a lot of assistance and support, and her husband was able to rebuild the store actually, and the children are now receiving a trauma care because of the bombing that I experienced. So warplanes, drones, but the third strategy that Turkey is using in Iraqi Kurdistan is building military bases and occupying territory. This map is from just about 8 months ago, and shows the area of spanning from the Iranian to the Syrian border that is controlled by Turkey. Those little, if you can still see those red circles, those are the Turkish bases there are many more than this. There's around 60 to 70 bases the Turkish forces built inside of Iraqi Kurdistan, from which they started to fire with artillery at civilians, at farmers, at shepherds, at families, and that led to hundreds of people fleeing from their villages, completely abandoning their villages, and losing their homes and losing the income that they lived from for the whole year. Dunya Rashid was a student. She was 19 years old when she went with other women from her village up to the mountains to collect wild plants. Those wild plants are actually a very important income for the families between May and June of each year. They went to collect, and as they were collecting those plants, Turkish forces fired an artillery or mortar from the base, and it went directly into her and killed her on the spot. The Turkish forces came down from the base and collected all the evidence and said, "Don't tell anyone that that actually she died because of the shelling." The death certificate that her family received was that she just died from an unknown kind of explosion. That this was the reason why she died. So her family, that you can see on the right side, began to advocate and say, like, this is not true. We want the world to know how our daughter died. We want the world to know what happened. This is not right. This is not just. And also we need the support from the government, because in Iraqi Kurdistan, people who were died as the result of war can also receive some form of compensation or stipend from the government. The family has not been receiving anything. Weldon mentioned Herura village in the mountains that lies about 5 to 6 miles south of the Turkish border. And at this moment, this is the only village, the last village that is still inhabited by civilians, by people. It's a village of 44 families. They have been displaced several times throughout history because of Iraqi forces, because of the genocidal Alpha campaign in the 80s. And then in the 90s, when the families came back and they started to rebuild the village that was completely burned down, Turkish forces started to bomb in the area. But during the 30 years that Turkey has been bombing Kurdistan, building bases, killing civilians, Herura was actually a village with relative peace. They were able to build homes, to farm, to use the land without actually being targeted directly. And everything changed last year in April when Turkey started a new operation, and the forces just started to bomb the area that you can see. There is like a kind of an oval that says base over Herura. Turkish warplanes came, started to bomb the area. Then the helicopters came, they started to fire. And they brought soldiers who rappelled down from the helicopters and started to build a base. Eventually, Turkish forces built 4 bases around Herura, and they started to fire with artillery at the people in the village. Ramazan Ali is one farmer who actually went to his land, and when he was targeted by the artillery, the shelling burned many acres of land that people used for farming, orchards, fruit trees. These are some remnants of war that is now throughout that is left in the village now. You can see the 2 hands. These are hands of a teacher who is showing one exploded and one unexploded piece of weapon that landed in their school. So Herura has 18 families stayed. Out of the 44, 18 are still there. Those 18 families have 29 children. Those children are going to the school. And teachers told us while we were there with CPT that at some point, sometimes during the classes even, Turkey starts firing at the school or near the school. Several times the school was hit by the shrapnel. from the artillery. Then the villagers came. They just fixed the school, put the windows back again. One day teachers came and they saw those unexploded pieces of ammunition, and that's an ammunition that is used by helicopters when they fire from their cannons. We would like to share a little bit about the resistance of people in this situation. We are talking about war, we're talking about death, we're talking about displacement, we are talking about bombed homes, burned land, injuries, but people still do resist. You can see a photo of 7 teachers from the Herure school. When we met with them, they told us, we are coming here every day, 6 times a week. We're coming to teach because we don't want to leave the children uneducated. We are, and all of them but one come from outside of the village. They need to come every day. They drive on a road that Turkish forces bombed several times. They told us every day we come, we are afraid that one of the shells or the bombs will just hit our car. We are dead. But we come every day. They said until there is one student in the village, we will continue teaching. And they receive about $2 per hour of teaching. They receive a form of a stipend. It's not even a salary from the government, because the government actually pretty much abandoned the school and the village and just left people in the hands of the Turkish forces. Kak Ibrahim is a farmer who continues to plant his field of cucumbers. Behind him you can see a burnt part of the mountain that is burned by the bombing, but still he will come every day and he will plant. The families, many of the families feel very abandoned, and they told us many times, saying like we are just like, we feel very, very lonely. There is no one. We are here. We are surrounded by mountains, by Turkish bombs, by bases. But you, as CPT, when you come here, you are the bridge. You build a bridge between us and the world outside. We don't feel alone anymore when you are present. So this is resistance as well, is to share, is to speak, is to let the world know, and to tell people, look, we are here, and this is happening to us. We have been, and we as CPT have been building partnerships with various communities. As you saw on the map, throughout all the border where everything Turkey bombs, we have been able over the years to build a network with of contacts with the families that are bombed, with the communities that were displaced and that are leaving, sometimes coming back, then displaced again, with local authorities that like local mayors that are responsible for the region, and some of them actually want to stop Turkish bombing. Some of them really feel responsible for the people that they are representing, and some of them, they are much closer to the government and saying like, we don't want to talk about it. And thanks to CPT's work, many of the village leaders or members of the families who lost members in the bombings, they were able to speak to the government, speak to the parliament members, because of the accompaniment of CPT. So we were able to build the bridge, not only by sharing, by advocating, by writing reports and telling the stories of the people, but also build the bridge by accompaniment, by organizing meetings with government officials, as you can see in the picture, that said, yes, we will receive them. We will meet with the families. We want to hear what they want to say, and we want to help as well. And also the cooperation and the relationship building with different families brought many of the families together for the first time, because the area is very vast. There are high mountains, remote valleys. Many of the bombings are happening in those valleys. So the families that are impacted and that lost someone in the bombings, they never met together. They live in their village, they experience this, and then through a campaign that the families wanted to be part of and organized, and that they called actually "Hear Us Now, Stop the Bombing." They were able to come together, start meeting, start strategizing, start organizing, wrote a statement together what they request from Turkey, from PKK as the other part of the war, from government officials, from organizations. And part of this the campaign is growing and growing now. We actually were able to bring a number of other organizations who are joining us to work on this together, to advocate for the end of the cross-border bombings in Iraqi Kurdistan. I would like to invite Weldon to bring us to at least to our time of presenting to the end, and then open a space for your questions.
Thank you, Lukasz. Yes, I just wanted to end with this one. We have 4 grandchildren, and always when I go back, my grandchildren draw or write something for me. And a few years ago, Olivia, who's now 11, was 8 at this time, just simply sat at my desk and wrote this "War Must End," signed by Olivia, and then gave it to me. So that's gone with me. And connect that to a quote from John Paul Lederach, and John Paul is so good, and I just communicated with him last week again, but wrote this so well: the well-being of our grandchildren is directly tied to the well-being of our enemies' grandchildren. I'm doing this because I believe this is what God called me to do on behalf of my children and grandchildren, but all children and grandchildren of the world, and particularly the Kurdish grandchildren where we are. So I'll leave you with that, and glad to see what you have to offer. I see some questions. HA, do you want to read the questions, or what's the easiest way for us to address questions? And Lukasz, stay on and we'll both respond.
You're muted, HA. I can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, so Weldon and Lukasz, what a wonderful presentation. My goodness, that was just really rich and powerful. I was very moved by it, and I'm glad that you were with us tonight. It's just really an enriching experience. So thank you so much. You're not only involved there, but you're involved here, and we appreciate it a great deal. So thank you. At the end of our question and answer time, I assume we have another 10-15 minutes to proceed with that. Daniel Reel will share a prayer on behalf of all of us. So we'll look forward to that. Meanwhile, I think you can see the questions as well as I can, and I think we can go just down the line and let you address them. So feel free, either Lukasz or Weldon, to go ahead. Titus has asked the first couple questions.
Lukasz, will you address?
Yes, I can answer the first one, and then maybe you can
Yes.
answer the second. Yeah.
Yes.
So the question is: do Kurdish people have a conflicted relationship with other governments in the region, or is it primarily the Turkish government? So Kurdish people suffered a lot over the last 100 years from those 4 different governments that Weldon mentioned: Iraqi, Turkish, Iranian, and Syrian. Kurdish people have experienced oppression, political marginalization, genocide, massive displacement by millions of people, actually, and this destruction of villages, so the roots of the conflict are in colonialism, in racism, in creating borders that were drawn by Britain and France, and later by Turkey after the First World War. So What is happening now is a result of colonization in the past, of drawing of the borders, creating states, separating indigenous people into under different governments that don't include them in their decision making at all, and oppress them and forbid them to speak the language and practice their culture. So because of this oppression of decades long, in all those 4 countries where Kurdish people live, and in most of them they are actually the biggest minority, the biggest ethnic minority, the people organized and started to fight for their rights. They did it through political ways, through non-violent struggle, and also through violent struggle. So PKK, that Weldon mentioned and at the beginning, is one of those groups. It's one of the guerrilla insurgent groups that started to fight against Turkish government to protect Kurdish lives and future, and build it. And so the PKK fighters have been targeting Turkish military inside of Turkey, but 30 years ago, many of them, they settled and started building bases in Iraq. And it was in the time when actually the Kurdistan was becoming the autonomous region within Iraq, when Kurdistan government was taking control, and those Iraqi Kurdish insurgents who were fighting against Saddam and against genocide, right, and under the US first invasion, 91, so the guerrilla fighters, they moved from the mountains, they started to build the government, and in this time the PKK came from Turkey and from Syria and settled in the mountains. So this is so Turkey bombs them primarily, or they say so. They say we are fighting terrorists who are fighting against us. What Turkey is doing, they target civilians who are living in the same area. PKK has a base, some maybe on a mountain. There is a village down in the valley. PKK does their own things. Villagers do their own things. Turkey comes and bombs the whole area. And then in the last few years, especially like in Herura and the villages around, Turkey just came, invaded, built bases, and displaced everyone from the area. So actually Herura is the only village that stayed. 18 families that are still there and refused to leave, despite injuries, despite chemical bombs that Weldon also talked about, besides school being despite school being bombed.
10:40 for. Yeah. Well, I'm playing a little bit of it to see how it is. I'm playing a little bit of it.
Somebody has their microphone on, if we would meet that. I'll respond, I think Titus, yes.
Sorry, guys.
Your good question on sympathetic congresspersons. Yes, I'm very, very fortunate because in Seattle, our congressperson is Pramila Jayapal, who leads the Progressive Democratic Congress. I have just been communicating a lot with her foreign affairs staff person. 10 days ago, I gave this presentation to her to find that out. She has been part of a new resolution with 20 congresspeople to try to stop some of this. She's very, very concerned, although Kurdistan in the Middle East isn't her primary area. But it's very, very difficult overall at this time to get that. We do have connections. We're doing more with the embassies in Iraq this fall than ever before with the consulates in the Kurdish region in Erbil. We've had a lot of meetings with consulate officials in European Union. Right now, finally, we have a very good connection to the US consulate and Jen Carter, who I have gotten to know fairly well as the US political officer in the consulate in Erbil, who really shares our concerns, very concerned for human rights. So we finally feel like we're making some inroads into more of the diplomatic channels. They're relying on our work and our information to work their diplomatic channels because we're the people on the ground and doing the work. But thank you.
Yeah, and I kind of spoke more about the third question about why Turkey bombs civilians. I can also add more about the relationship with the other governments. So in Iraq, the Kurdistan government is a part of the Federal Republic. So at this moment, Iraq has two governments, two presidents. and the Kurdistan one and the Iraqi central one. By the way, both of them are Kurds because after the second US invasion, the power in Iraq was redistributed in the way that the biggest power in the government was given to the Shia Arab people who were oppressed under Saddam. Then there was some power given to the Sunni people of Iraq who had the power before, and then the Kurdish people also received, like, well, that autonomy was strengthened, and they received the Iraqi president as a position for Kurdish people in Iraq, because it doesn't have much power, but it represents Iraq. So the relationship between the Kurdistan and Iraqi government is collaborative. There are sometimes they clash on different topics. Iraqi government is obliged to send 17% of their budget to Kurdistan, and to pay salaries of soldiers, of police, of teachers, of other government employees. Then Kurdistan sometimes sells too much oil on their own independently, which they are supposed to bring the money into the Iraqi budget and then receive the money. So there are many issues, but in Iraq, Kurdistan is doing very well. It has its own visa policy, its own government, so it's an autonomous region. But also Iraq will not allow Kurdistan to, like, Iraq controls how much power Kurdistan can have. So it's this. Then with Turkey, Turkey is oppresses Kurdish people all the time. PKK fights against them, Turkey bombs, and also inside of Turkey, Turkey jails Kurdish activists, bans Kurdish political parties, attacks their offices of the political parties. Like the oppression in Turkey is really difficult to be a Kurdish person and an activist. Similar situation is in Iran, where Iran also targets specifically Kurdish activists, hangs them, puts them in jail for many years. And so in Iran also there are several guerrilla groups that fight against the Iranian government. Some of them are settled inside of Iraqi Kurdistan as well, on the border with Iran. And so Iran sometimes also fires artillery, targeting supposedly the fighters, but also target civilians. So we also are partnering. Some of the families that we partner with are those that lost family members because of the Iranian bombings. And in Syria, where Kurdish people also have been oppressed for decades, in the war that started as a democratic movement against the dictatorship, then it became an armed movement against dictatorship. Kurdish people were able to gain control over the northern eastern Syria, most of the north of Syria, and create their own political entity with their own rules on politics that is very inclusive of many of other ethnic groups, including Arabs, Christians, Yazidi people, and that region is still in the war because they're fighting against the jihadist forces, but also Turkey is targeting them a lot, and so Turkey comes and bombs with drones, invades the territory. A few years ago, Turkish forces took a big area, displaced 500,000 Kurdish people from there, and brought in jihadis. So those jihadi, very similar to the ISIS, was just brought by Turkey inside and let them take control over the territory and take Kurdish homes, burn their homes, kick them out from there, and take over.
I respond to the next one is about traveling in Iraqi Kurdistan. It's because we travel a lot, it takes a long time to drive anywhere, partly because we're on mountain roads and they're pretty bad and so on. But the big challenge for traveling is there are checkpoints everywhere, around cities, crossing districts from one region to another that are run by the intelligence service agency called Asaish. Many times we don't have any problem, or they wave us through, and then we often get stopped or checked, but people who live there are constantly. So we're dealing with that a lot. We were working in the Nala Valley because it set up new checkpoints there. We had a hearing with some Kurdish leaders this fall with Nala Valley residents to try to remove some of the checkpoints in their area. So yeah, travel and checkpoints can be a big issue, but it's part of, we just navigate that by the work we have to do to get anywhere or do anything.
Well, then are there folks who would rather not have CPT present in that region?
Sure. Yeah, and even in the intelligence, I think some, so for instance, I remember once somebody at the checkpoint asking us who you are, and we're a human rights team. He said, human rights, there are no human rights here. And then another time, another one responded, well, good for you, welcome. And so they're people, they have different views on what that means. But yeah, there's certainly some people in association in the government who would rather CPT wasn't there. Isn't that fair? Lukasz?
But you know, the team doesn't fear for their own lives, their own risk. Or do they?
Yeah. Well, we do, but
Yes.
we are trying to we try to be careful as much as possible, but at the same time we do go to the villages that have been bombed by Turkey, and we for as one protection that we use is that you saw the red hats, the red vests whenever we can, so that we are very visible from the air, and that it's very clear that we are not that we don't really belong there in a way, because with all the red color. Plus our car has on the roof has a big NGO sign, so that it's also clear for the drones that we're an organization. And yeah, and I think that if we only work on this that we are sharing now with Weldon, maybe the government people will be like CPT more, and some people from the government really like us because in the government many people really don't want the Turkish bombings, and it's the same in both in the Iraqi and the Kurdish government. Actually, there was one question about who are we speaking with. We speak with both, with Iraqi and Kurdistan government, and it's the same. The people themselves, they speak to both governments or want to speak to both governments and ask them for support and for protection. So it's we are, but the problem is that we are working on other things as well that Weldon mentioned a little bit at the beginning, and that is to accompany civil activists, civil rights activists who are targeted by the government itself. So for that reason, we face some difficulties, and we do worry about getting arrested by the government, and each time we go to the active war zone, we do worry. We pray, we reflect, we worry that we may not come back.
What is your visa situation? Are you tourists, or do you have some kind of special visa status?
We are registered with Iraqi Kurdistan government as a non-governmental organization.
Okay.
So because of that, we can work and we can receive visas. So we have work visas that are renewable every year. We are right now in the process of actually renewing our registration for this year. We still have a few more months. It's good, but there is a lot of bureaucracy around it, and we have to account for every dollar that we spend with the. I mean, not exactly, but we do have to, give them our finance records and many different things to the government to be registered and to be able to work. Without this, we cannot have the visa. We cannot work. This registration also allows us to pass checkpoints, as Weldon was saying. Like without this document that we are registered, we would not be able to travel.
Do you feel like you're being watched every day, or your movements are being monitored?
No, I don't think so. That is that far, but our phones might be tapped. Some of the phones. Sometimes it seems that somebody tried to hack our email sometimes. But in the place where we live, it's a city, a big city, and there are many people from the city itself like CPT and do support CPT. So it's Yeah, I think if you lived in other, if in some different parts of Kurdistan, also it will be different, probably. So we are lucky that we are in a place that is more favorable of our presence than some other ones, some other cities.
Maybe this would be a good time for you to share that you do communicate. You do have some kind of a newsletter, right, Weldon and Lukasz, that you share. Some of us receive it. Is it difficult to get that information out from where you are, or?
No, we share regularly, and it goes, we do lots of articles, reports, reflections, and working on a major report now that will about recent events that'll be out soon. You can go to cpt.org and then the CPT IK.org. I could, AJ, I'll send you a sort of resource sheet, one-page thing that I send out, and you could share it with this network.
Excellent.
That gives you access to all of that, and then you can well, social media. We'll have a lot of stuff on social media quite regularly, as well as through the CPT newsletter and online stuff.
But it's not particularly a good idea for us to communicate back to you, to feed back the information that you've shared with us, right?
No, you can communicate. You mean when we're on team?
I don't know, some of the reports that you've shared. Yeah, I think you've said be best to send it back via another, or communicate in another way, not send that report back. Maybe I'm mistaken.
I think probably what I was referring to, when I have a whole network of my own, that's people in congregation,
okay.
That, and what I was saying is not to reply to that one just because I have 400 or 500 people on mine, and if people reply to that, it gets lost in an email thread that it's hard to track.
Okay.
So
okay.
if you send me a direct email to my email, then it's fine. So, and that's true whether I'm there or at home. We're constantly communicating and in touch. We want to get as much information out to as many people as possible, and want you to share.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions that need to be addressed?
There was one more that we haven't answered yet, and it's, are there other international peacemaking groups doing similar work in the region? Unfortunately, no. There are none, and it is a big problem. But in the past year or so, it's about a year, the campaign that we talked about and the cross-border bombings now is this brought several organizations to work together. There are two of them are from the United Kingdom. There is one from Italy. There is a platform of, it's called Iraqi Civil Society Solidarity Initiative that started to advocate against the bombings and for peace and for protection of civilians in the war. So on the advocacy level, yes, there are some organizations that are working together now. There are Iraqi and Kurdish and international, but going to the villages and building the partnerships directly with people, no. So many of the work of the campaign is based on our meetings with the people, on the partnerships we were able to build at CPT.
If there are not further questions, Bob, do you want to ask one?
I just want to add something to our two brothers. You know that the F-35 is one of the primary contracts of Lockheed Martin, and Brandywine has devoted a lot of time to getting arrested at Lockheed Martin, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
We go back many, many years.
Yes, we do.
Back to the 70s.
Right. Well, that being the
Weathered
case,
the time well. You look good.
Thank you.
Mike, this would be a good time for Daniel Reel to share a prayer on behalf of the work that's just been shared with us. Daniel? You want to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Let's pray. Kind Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessing of Jesus on peacemakers. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." And we pray, Lord, our world is an awful situation with the wars and money spent on the military. We just pray that you would forgive us, forgive our nation. And we look forward to the day when Jesus will come and rule the world, and the Lamb and the Lion will lie down together, and it will not be anything that will hurt in your holy mountain. And we just commit the work of this good committee into your hands, that we would be able to make a good witness to our government, and that we would be able to decrease the military budget, and the money could be spent to feed the hungry people in the world. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank
Amen.
you, Daniel. Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Let me just interject here that Galen Fitzke is on the line. I don't see his face, but I'm glad that he's participating with us today. There he is. Galen, welcome. And this Galen is, I think, Dick's grandson, and Galen will be sharing with us about the work of the Peace Building Office of the Church of the Brethren in Washington, D.C. next time. So tune in to hear Galen on the 9th of March. Otherwise, have a good evening. It's been wonderful. Thanks again, Weldon and Lukasz, for your wonderful presentation. It was superior.
Thank you.
Peace,
It was
blessings.
thank you
Have a
so
good
much.
night.
Thank you. Peace be with you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night now.
Good night.